two major studies of hydroxychloroquine in patients who have coronavirus have shown no benefit, none.
I happen to be taking it.
Hydroxychloroquine?
I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine.
What in God's name is he doing?
Hello and welcome to The Nexus. All that ranting and raving you've just been listening to is about a drug called hydroxychloroquine. It has been used for decades to treat malaria, lupus and other conditions, and no one's batted an eyelid about it, until now. Last week, President Trump suddenly announced he was taking it to prevent getting COVID-19. He's actually been touting its benefit for months.
There's tremendous promise based on the results and other tests. There's tremendous promise.
Almost immediately, a number of political opponents, medical professionals, and journalists railed against the president's advice.
It will kill you. I cannot stress enough. This will kill you.
Well, if it's as simple as that, why are scientists around the world trialing the drug as a preventative medication? Is it useful or not? We'll ask our panel, including a scientist, Dr. Ruana Barnabas, who's trialing the drug right now in Seattle. But first, a quick reminder of how hydroxychloroquine went from the prescription pad to headline news.
One treatment in particular has been getting a lot of attention.
Hydroxychloroquine.
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 Hydroxychloroquine. I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine. Right now, yeah. I've heard a lot of good stories.
Hydroxychloroquine is a very safe drug. It has been given to tens of millions of individuals in the world since its approval.
This is a pill that's been used for a long time, for 30, 40 years on the malaria and on lupus too, and even on arthritis, I guess, from what I understand.
What does the science say about this drug?
We've gotten numerous warnings saying that people who have taken it have started to get heart arrhythmias, even fatal heart arrhythmias, and that means that they could potentially die from it.
Now, isn't that the final side effect?
All I can tell you is, so far, I seem to be okay.
He shouldn't be taking it. I mean, you know, his own FDA has said it should not be taken outside of a clinical trial.
There's a very good chance that this has an impact, especially early on.
There is no evidence that tells us that taking hydroxychloroquine is either safe or effective for preventing COVID-19 infection.
What's driving this? It's a blind obsession to disprove the effectiveness of a drug that is being used right now, tonight, in medical centers across America.
Why would we ever think a Fox News star or any president should be promoting a drug? It's outlandish.
What in God's name is he doing?
You'd be surprised at how many people are taking it, especially the frontline workers, before you catch it.
Tampa General Hospital is testing it as a possible way to protect their frontline workers.
British healthcare workers will begin taking part in a trial to determine if chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine can prevent COVID-19.
It seems to have an impact, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but if it doesn't, you're not going to get sick or die.
This information is provided for public education purposes only. Please consult a licensed pharmacist or healthcare professional before taking any medication.
Well, you'll be glad to hear we're leaving the politicians and pundits out of this program, and we will, as they say, be guided by the science. And here are our three scientists. Dr. Ruana Barnabas is looking at whether hydroxychloroquine is effective at preventing COVID-19. Her colleague, Dr. Christine Johnston, is overseeing a new trial looking at if hydroxychloroquine is useful for people who already have COVID-19. And finally, Dr. Eck, well, she's been prescribing it for her patients in the hope of preventing them from getting to hospital in the first place. Okay, let's start with Dr. Ruana Barnabas. Dr. Barnabas, welcome to the program. Let me start by asking you about the trial that you are overseeing.
Thanks so much, Matthew. The trial that I'm overseeing is the hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19 post-exposure prophylaxis. And the aim of the study is to treat people who have been exposed to coronavirus disease and prevent them from acquiring infection and prevent disease. So we are recruiting people who are in the household with someone who has coronavirus disease, and we are offering them enrollment in the study. And in the study, you either get hydroxychloroquine or a control. And at the end of the study, we will know whether hydroxychloroquine works to prevent coronavirus disease, and also we will have good data on its safety.
Now, you had a variety of drugs to choose from, presumably. What made you choose to trial hydroxychloroquine?
There is good laboratory data that hydroxychloroquine works. It prevents SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes coronavirus disease, from attaching to the cell, entering the cell, and it also stops the virus from replicating. And we've also seen in some observational studies that it can prevent individuals from acquiring disease. And while these data are promising, we really do need rigorous studies as the next step to test hydroxychloroquine efficacy.
And at the same time, while you're conducting these trials, we hear a lot of reports on the media about terrible side effects of the drug, even though it's been prescribed for 60 years and to 5 billion doses have been given out. So why does that not put you off continuing with these trials?
So this drug has a really long track history, decades long, as you said, of being safe and we're also able to use it among women who are pregnant, among elderly people, and given that it's really strong safety profile, I haven't been concerned about the safety. Also, within randomized control trials, we've been following safety very closely, and we know that for outpatients, people who are well, that this drug has been quite safe. There are concerns that have been raised about safety in the literature and elsewhere, but those studies were done among patients who were in the hospital who were quite sick to begin with, and they weren't done in a randomized manner, so we don't know for sure whether it was just people who were more sick who were getting the drug to begin with, and the complications they would have had them regardless of whether or not they received hydroxychloroquine.
Right. Now, there have been doctors on the television, on the internet, all over the place, saying categorically that hydroxychloroquine does not protect people from getting COVID-19 and is potentially very dangerous. Have a listen to one doctor in the UK.
Who on earth is prescribing this? Well, I suppose he's the President of the United States. It's just so dangerous. And no, it won't be helping him one iota to ward off the COVID-19 virus. If he wanted to ward off the COVID-19 virus, he should lose weight. That is proven. We know that obesity puts people at risk, but taking this drug won't protect him at all, and it won't protect anyone else.
So, Dr. Barnabas, we have there a British GP saying, it won't help him one iota to ward off the COVID virus. Would you say that observations like that, remarks like that, judgments like that are a bit premature?
Yes, absolutely. Honestly, we don't know whether or not hydroxychloroquine works yet to prevent or treat infection. It's very encouraging to see the data in the lab, and some observational studies are encouraging, but we really need the gold standard randomized control trials to be able to assess the efficacy and safety of hydroxychloroquine. And in fact, all the media around hydroxychloroquine has made it difficult to communicate really straightforward messages, and we spend a good amount of time with our participants talking through exactly questions like this.
And has it made it harder for you to recruit participants?
Yes, we have had to have many more conversations. That said, once we are able to spend time with participants and talk through the pros and cons and present the evidence to date and the scientific question that we are testing, most participants are able to come with us on the scientific journey. However, we have had some participants withdraw, or their family members express concerns about the study, and the recruitment has been much harder than we expected.
Just before we move on to Dr. Johnston and the trial looking at hydroxychloroquine as a treatment, just wanted to ask you, when do you think you'll be able to come back and share your results with us?
We hope very much that we will be able to enroll quickly and that we have an answer by the end of the summer. It's really critical for us to have options for prevention and treatment so we can disrupt the transmission of the coronavirus disease within the community so that in the fall we have some tools for both prevention and treatment.
Okay, let's move on to whether or not hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine can be used as a treatment for people who already have COVID-19. Dr. Christine Johnston is Dr. Barnabas's colleague there in Seattle. Dr. Johnston, tell us about your trial. What are you looking at?
Well, thanks for having me, Matthew. We are looking at whether hydroxychloroquine or hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin can prevent severe complications of COVID-19 in patients who are early in their infection and well enough to be at home. We are looking at whether these medications can prevent hospitalization and viral pneumonia, and also whether they can decrease viral shedding from the nose.
Dr. Johnson, I just want to make reference to a study that was published in The Lancet recently, which appears to be very, very discouraging, although they are looking at the effects of hydroxychloroquine on COVID patients who are already in hospital or in ICUs. And it says that actually taking it made things worse. The study was based on 96,000 COVID patients' data, nearly 15,000 of whom were given hydroxychloroquine or a related form of chloroquine, either with or without an antibiotic. And the study found that patients were more likely to die in hospital and develop heart rhythm complications than other COVID patients in a control group. Let's hear from Dr. Sapan Desai, who's one of the authors of that report.
Our study is one of the largest of its kind to be performed. It is high-quality evidence about how we should be treating COVID-19 patients in the hospital. Chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine both are associated with a higher risk of dangerous heart arrhythmias and an increased chance of death.
So, Dr. Johnson, this does appear very discouraging. Can you just comment on the data that The Lancet published?
Yes, so the Lancet article was a large study of many people who had COVID-19 infection who were sick enough to be hospitalized. I think the important thing about that study is that it was an observational study. And so patients were not randomly selected to receive hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine. And we know in that case that there can be bias and people can be placed on hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine who may be sicker than those who are not. And that's why the evidence is compelling, but I think even the authors mentioned that we need the high quality randomized clinical trial evidence to really know what the effect of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine are on COVID-19 infections and whether or not they're safe.
One of the authors of that report said that whilst hydroxychloroquine might not be a problem or produce any side effects in normal people, healthy people, in people who have got to the hospital level or the ICU level, that study would indicate it's of no use to them and perhaps actually makes things worse. Is there something about being in that state already, that's the severe, with handling those severe symptoms, that means hydroxychloroquine can exacerbate the symptoms?
Well, I think we know that COVID-19 infection can affect the heart and can cause a heart inflammation and some other cardiac issues. And that is why we need to study the medication and make sure that it is safe. It may have a different safety profile than it does in healthy adults who are outpatients. But again, I think answering the question is really only possible in a randomized trial. And that is our best way to show whether it works and whether it's safe.
And yet, based on this, the WHO has suspended their trials into hydroxychloroquine called Solidarity. They're clearly very worried. But Oxford University's study known as Recovery continues. Why do you think the two institutions have taken different approaches?
Well, my understanding from the WHO Solidarity trial is that they are paused to look at their safety data and ensure that there is not a signal. With every clinical trial, there is routine and frequent monitoring of safety data to ensure that it is reasonable and safe to go on. And my understanding is that they are looking at those data to ensure that it is safe, but not necessarily that they've seen a safety signal. I do think it's very reassuring that the recovery trial has continued and that a safety signal was not seen in that study, which has already enrolled quite a number of people.
So just to be clear, from your point of view, the study published in The Lancet does not preclude the possibility that hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine could be useful as a preventative, nor does it preclude the possibility that it could be useful as a treatment in the early stages.
That's correct. I think we need to continue to do these trials and to get those critical answers.
Just for a moment, leaving aside hydroxychloroquine, are there any treatments out there that are effective, against COVID-19 right now?
There was a recent publication of a large trial conducted in several countries of remdesivir, which is an antiviral medication, which shows some efficacy in inpatients to decrease the time of to recovery. And so that is a promising new agent that is now available.
But is that correct that it didn't have any effect on the mortality rate?
Well, the study was analyzed before all the data were in because there was such a promising signal, and the signal for mortality did not reach statistical significance, but the full data are still awaited. And it is possible that when we have the full data set, it will be a statistically significant difference in mortality.
Okay, let's go back to President Trump now and his reasoning as to why he's taking hydroxychloroquine as a preventative against COVID-19. Now, in the absence of any authoritative studies that really back it up, he actually based his decision on a great deal of anecdotal evidence and letters that he'd been receiving. Let's have a listen.
Can you explain, sir, though, why you started taking it? Have you been exposed?
Yeah, because no, not at all. I just said that I've had so many letters from people, like the one I told you about. I got it last week. I'll give you, would you like a copy of it? I'd love to give you, if you ask Molly, she'll give you a copy of it. But this is a doctor, he doesn't want anything. I don't know him, never heard of him. But he treats people that we're talking about. And he said out of hundreds of people that he's treated, he hasn't lost one. And he just wanted me to know about it. That's all. He wasn't saying, gee, could I have dinner with you, Mr. President? I'd like to come to the White House. But I've received many such letters. I've received a lot of positive letters.
And that brings us to our final guest now, Dr. Alita Eck. I think, Dr. Eck, you're of a similar opinion to the doctors who have been writing to President Trump, and you have been prescribing hydroxychloroquine for some of your patients who have been suffering from COVID-19. Can you just tell us why you decided to do that?
Early on, when this pandemic began and we saw these horrifying stories in Italy and even in our own country, I realized that the key is to try to help people early on and not get them sick enough to be in the hospital. So I recognized that in Africa, there's very few cases of COVID-19, and a lot of people there take hydroxychloroquine. Plus, I knew that hydroxychloroquine had been used in the SARS epidemic back in 2005 study had been done. So I thought, let's look at this. The drug's been around since 1955. It's been in the military. They use it all the time in the military. And they prevent malaria. They give it once a week, 200 milligrams once a week. So as people started to come into my office with fever, cough, shortness of breath, we didn't have good testing to be done to see if they'd had the virus. But I thought if we give them 5 days worth of hydroxychloroquine, give them azithromycin, give them zinc, and see how they do. Well, we've probably had 35 people come in with the similar symptoms, and they all got better relatively quickly, maybe in 3 or 4 days. So there's just no reason not to give it if the person is relatively healthy before that. I have a son who's an ophthalmologist. He's never seen an eye problem with hydroxychloroquine. And then the cardiac problems are for people who are really very sick. So I wasn't really concerned about that. I figured 5 days, of hydroxychloroquine was not enough to cause any kind of major side effects. And sure enough, nobody complained. They just all got better. So
how many of your patients you prescribed hydroxychloroquine to actually had a positive test for COVID-19?
No, they actually didn't. We would try to get their testing done. We just have struggled very hard to get the right kind of testing, the swabs or even the antibody tests. And there are very special criteria that they had to have. And it would take 5 days to get the results back. So by the time they got the results back, they would have been done taking the medicine I'd given them. So I didn't even think it was necessary. I don't have absolute proof, but they came with fever, shortness of breath, often a loss of taste and smell, and a cough. I just put them on. Some had diarrhea. We put them on.
So they had many of the symptoms
we were just preventing
that were being. They had many of the symptoms that were being reported for COVID-19. Then you are talking about a small group, not really statistically significant, not like a study as our other two doctors are doing. So how would you be confident to draw such a conclusion that hydroxychloroquine is effective?
Well, when you have 2,000 anecdotes, perhaps it becomes a study. Lots of my colleagues have been doing the same thing, despite the fact that even our governors have tried to say that you only can prescribe it if they have the symptoms or if they're COVID positive. Since I couldn't get the test, I didn't even know if they were COVID positive for sure. But for some reason, the governors were restricting it. Now, they were afraid that there would be a run on hydroxychloroquine and all the people that were taking it for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis would then be without it. And so that kind of flies in the face of saying it's so dangerous because all these other people are taking it. So the narrative of why people felt it was such a dangerous drug was really over the top and didn't fit with reality. So I just had no hesitation in giving it to people who clinically were coming in. And remember, this is an epidemic and it's the pandemic and everybody had been sheltered in place and it was a very frightening time for a lot of people.
Wasn't it sensible for the local authorities to stockpile, given that they were anticipating a run on the drug because President Trump was promoting it?
I don't think he was really promoting it. He just said, hey, there's something out there that might be really helpful. And from that time on, it was the beginning of February, suddenly there became such an outcry against the drug, which he has even said he's sorry he ever mentioned it. But because of the outcry against him, which then led to an outcry against that drug.
Now, you mentioned 2,000 anecdotes, and actually, you're talking about from all your fellow physicians at the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons. And that sort of unified response from that group, saying it was very effective against COVID-19, made it all over the world. But we had it here in one of our most popular newspapers. And another newspaper, though, pushed back against your findings, your conclusions, if you like. It was more of a left-wing newspaper, and it described your group as a fringe group of conservative, pro-Trump physicians, offers advice that is not based on evidence. Where does your group get that sort of reputation from, and do you think it's unfair?
The Association of American Physicians and Surgeons was founded in 1943, and it's a group of very principled physicians who were concerned that the private physician-patient relationship was in jeopardy with a big government takeover of the practice of medicine. And so we don't all have agreement on every issue, but we definitely believe in real science, and we want to see our patients do well.
We are coming towards the end of the program. In the interest of full disclosure, I think it's fair to say, and I think you'd be proud to say it, that you are generally in favor of President Trump. Is that right?
Yes, I think he's done a lot of good things for the country.
Well, then, with that in mind, I will ask you this question. If it wasn't that President Trump put it forward and talked about it and extolled the virtues of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine, do you think there would be such a big pushback on this? How political has this whole question become?
It's been extraordinarily political. And I do believe that if he had not mentioned it, it would have just been another drug that was looked at. You know, unless there's another motive that people have for not wanting hydroxychloroquine. It's very inexpensive. Nobody's going to make a lot of money on it. So perhaps some of these new drugs that cost $1,000 a dose are something that people are looking to promote, that they want to get in on that. So perhaps that's part of it. But I think the fact that Trump mentioned it was a huge reason for it being dissed by so many people.
That is where we will have to leave it. Dr. Alita Eck, Dr. Christine Johnson, and Dr. Ruan Barnabas, thank you very much, all of you, for your contributions to the Nexus. And thank you at home for watching. Remember, you can see this and all our previous episodes on our channel on YouTube. Until next week, then, goodbye.